And I think people go through life with that attitude, even about startups. It's like, I need to be doing the right moves. Am I posting enough on LinkedIn? Am I saying what I do enough? How's my elevator pitch? And it's like, guys, chill. Are you building a great business? That's ultimately what it is about.
All right, welcome to Elevate Utah.
I'm Court Brady.
I am Carlos Souza. And today we have, am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Myrrha?
That's perfect.
All right, Diogo Myrrha with us. I am very excited to introduce Diogo to the audience today. Our first Brazilian entrepreneur on the podcast, so what a treat. Diogo went to BYU and graduated with a degree in economics. Go Cougs. Sorry, Court, you're outnumbered here today. Early in his career, he worked at Braven, was the first employee. After Braven, Diogo co-founded Luver, an essential oil diffuser company.
Rough patch.
Then after Luver, Diogo joined Warren Osborne's family office, which gave you a ton of experience in private investments. And after that is Album. And Album is a very well-known VC in Utah. You guys have invested in companies like DV, Sales Rabbit, Spiff, TaxBit, and some other amazing companies that have shaped the valley. So
we've been lucky.
What a treat to have you here, Diogo, with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's. I need an answer for this question. How did you get here from Brazil? How did you get to Utah? Tell us about your.
I thought you were wondering whether I drove here. I did drive here today.
We were wondering if you took the plane, the jet.
I got here from Brazil on a plane in 2007. I was invited to come to BYU. I'm not from a big city in Brazil. I'm not from São Paulo or the other main areas where people have been coming to BYU for a long time. In fact, I don't know that there was anyone from my hometown that came to BYU before I did. I'm from Belo Horizonte.
Okay.
And yeah, showing up was a little different than I actually did not know what to expect. I came by myself and didn't know a single person in Utah. So here we are 17 years later. So this is actually the marker where I will have spent more time in the U.S. than in Brazil.
Nice. And I saw on your LinkedIn you just became an American citizen. So congratulations.
I did. Thank you. That's last year, a year into that.
Who are you voting for?
Let's not get into that.
That's a great question.
So I think just to start off, you have a different background from people that we've had in the podcast, just coming from a different country. And would love to hear the experiences that you've had early on in your life that kind of shaped how you view the world. If we can start with that.
Yeah. I grew up in a very average, I would say, middle-class family in Brazil, which by every measure in the U.S. would probably qualify as a lower class family. And if you were comparing standard of living in Brazil versus the U.S. So housed with the tall fence around it with electric wires around in a kind of a weird part of town.
Were those fences to keep you guys in or to keep people out?
Both. I would say I would argue both. Although I spent a lot of time on the street, right? That's a thing we do in Brazil. You're playing soccer and riding your bike a ton. Started riding buses by myself. I was probably 11 or 12. These are city buses. There's no such thing as school bus. And from a very early age, developed an interest in making money. I got a ledger book from my parents. They were like, well, if you're going to make money, you got to care for that money. And I started ledgering when I was probably 10, maybe 11.
Wow.
And I wish I knew where that book was, by the way. I would love, I know the cover, exactly how it would look. I might actually ask my parents if they have that. And that was a really good thing for me. I was always interested in making money. So I was flipping, first I started selling candy at school. got busted for that, which was totally fine. Probably deserved it. Then I was going to military school, so I started buying these very cool military brooches and like pins and things that you can only get if you're in the military. And I would sell that at my sister's private school. All the rich kids loved that.
Oh, so you're getting that from your school?
Yeah, I was buying it from my school and selling it at her school. That was great. They eventually shut that down because they're like, military stuff shouldn't be going out the door like this. Then I started importing stuff from Paraguay. That was really profitable for a while. If you're in Brazil, taxes are high. Paraguay had no taxes at the time, so I had to literally buy it on eBay, Mercado Livre in Brazil. And I sold probably 25-ish MP3 players, Panasonic, little CD MP3 players. This is back in the CD days. Eventually pivoted into actual MP3 players. Probably sold 30 of those.
Those blue rounded ones.
Yep,
Oh,
exactly. Made some money doing that. So I was always really interested in not necessarily in entrepreneurship, but I was interested in the game of making money, and it was to me, it was really a fun game to play. And it wasn't about what I could buy. I actually was never a big spender, never really bought anything fancy. In fact, the most expensive thing I bought was a PlayStation 3 that had just been released. 2? Now I'm doubting myself. I think it was a 3. 2006 it would have been. So whatever PlayStation was. 2?
Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Best video game ever.
Okay, there we go. Bought it from the US. A friend of my mom's was going to Brazil, and it was like expensive ticket item. Bought that, and I was going to flip it. And my friends showed up at my house, and they're like, "Oh, let's play this!" You know, they were all excited, and I was like, "We can't play that." Why not? And I'm like, well, if you open the box, value goes down. We're not going to open the box. They had a heart attack that we weren't going to play. Eventually, I put it on the newspaper, the advertisement for it. Set up a time to meet a guy at the mall. Guy shows up with a gun and steals steals my life savings right there. Oh. So it was a good lesson on being a little smarter. But yeah, so your question on what things have you learned? I frankly learned to probably out hustle most people. I can work longer hours with more stamina than probably most of the population, and have a high tolerance for setbacks. Right, that was a pretty big setback. Yeah. Losing that thing when you're 16. Plus, your friends didn't get to play the thing. I wish we had played. If I knew we were going to get robbed that fateful afternoon. Then dealt with some hyperinflation early in my life, right? Brazil was going through a really unstable currency period, so I actually look at the inflationary environment we're in right now, and it's not... I'm not used to it. I'm actually pretty comfortable navigating this and seeing interest rate changes and things that have now benefited our venture industry greatly for the past 15 years. So, those environments change. If anything, it taught me how to have resilience in the face of change and not mind the, many things that can get thrown at you from the environment, from the external environment. So, is that good?
Yeah, that was amazing. So you are a teenager and you love making money, and then you have that painful experience. But I like what you said. You said that you didn't like making money to spend. You liked making money. So going from there over the years to where you are today.
Now I like spending.
Now you do like spending.
No, not crazy. But
where in that process did you find your why and your purpose, and what is it?
I think the why of people evolves over time. I would say my why right now is very much to work with entrepreneurs, great entrepreneurs. You know, at Album, we've been lucky. You named a few. The cool thing is there are some that you didn't name that are amazing founders, and that we're so proud of them, including the ones that try to build a great company and fail. So part of the reason for the name Album is that, you know, when you released an album back in the 80s or 90s, it would have anywhere from 12 to 22, 25 songs, and you never really knew which ones were going to be a hit. And as an artist, you just had to love them all. Essentially, you're releasing this thing, putting it out there to the public, and it will live forever. And, you know, not knowing which ones are going to be a hit is very much like what we live right now in venture, right? We don't know which companies are going to be great. We don't know which companies are going to flop, but we have to love them all, and we do love them all. So my why is working with these entrepreneurs that are building their life missions. They don't get to diversify their risk. I understand very clearly that I'm actually, you know, incredibly diversified through their actions, if you will. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I look at the opportunity I have to just work with these wonderful people that are so different in their own rights. And it is an opportunity of a lifetime. So that would be my why. My why is really working and seeing the transformation that these entrepreneurs go through. We've seen companies grow from, you know, zero to $200 million, and observing in revenue, by the way, observing how people change when they're managing themselves and a co-founder versus, you know, a team of 1,000 people or whatever, is just remarkable. People grow so much. So yes.
I love that. By the way, I think the Album is such a cool name. It's like it's got a vintage and
kind of timeless. We like it. We like the timelessness.
Cool. It's such a cool brand.
Thank you.
So I'd love two questions. So you did mention that you've had the opportunity to work with some amazing entrepreneurs, and even some of those failed. So I'd love to hear what made them great. But before that, tell us the story. How did Album come to be?
The inception of Album itself.
Yes.
So 2014, there's a group of Brazilians actually that approach a then private equity real estate investor and say, hey, let's put together a venture fund, because Utah seemed to be booming. That happens. That gets started as Peak Ventures. We did 2 funds under the banner of Peak Ventures, and in 2019 we rebranded the funds and moved away as Album. My partners and I didn't know each other before, which is pretty interesting. You know, we got married by God's design, I would say, more than, you know, by picking each other or dating, courting, and choosing each other. And that's a really good thing, actually, because we all bring our own strengths to the table. You know, Sid and John are very unique in their character and the way they do things. They're very different than me, very different upbringing. And I would say we're very, very complementary of each other. So very unique in that way. Unique in that we're not a monarchy. You know, most venture funds you can kind of point to and know exactly who runs that. In our case, we're equal partners in everything we do. And what that does is it creates ultimate accountability. If one of us is misbehaving, it's actually very doable to get rid of that one person. So there's a strong incentive to be always our best selves. So that's how Album came to be.
Awesome. And then the second question to that, you mentioned you worked with some great CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and even some of those failed, but they were still great to work with. What makes a great founder?
You know, I get asked that question a lot, especially by folks that don't fully understand the early stage formation of a company. And here's what I mean by that. There are so many skills that go into building a company. You know, there's speed. How quickly can you iterate? That's a very crucial skill. There is your ability to learn. There is humility to learn. There's also arrogance to do things your way. So all of those things come in different, I would say, in different doses on different people. And I'm really grateful that I play in the early stage. I'm pretty sure there's no way there's a substitution of humans for any sort of artificial intelligence, because there's no pattern recognition. There's no pattern matching in a great founder. In fact, I've worked with founders that are deeply technical. You know, they know, they wrote the first product, they wrote the first, code base for the first product. There are founders I work with that, have never touched software in their lives. There are founders that are great salespeople. There are founders that are awful salespeople. And maybe selling is the one skill that they all need to learn. But they can still be a great founder. Even if they start with no sales skills, they eventually learn sales skills. I do share with founders frequently that selling is the one thing that you probably do daily as a founder. You're selling your team to believe in you and your vision and where you're going. You're selling your customers, obviously. You're probably selling your investors at least a little bit, to keep believing in you. Although an album, we know we only need to be sold once. Once we're married, and we're with them forever. You're selling your family in the sacrifices you're making. I'm sure your opportunity cost, if you're a great founder, is great. So it is a sale, even if just, if not in the true sense of the word, you are selling your family into what you're doing. So selling is, I'd say, the premier thing you do as a founder. The one skill that probably you can't go without. But that's learnable. I've seen founders that were not good salespeople, and I've seen founders that do interesting, different strategies. Some are just really hard, and some are just really, stubborn. And stubbornness can be good until it's not. So there are so many things that are that make a great founder. It's really hard to have a pattern, to recognize a pattern on it.
Can I challenge you on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Without ever,
please.
The only investment I did, I lost all of it. So
great work. That's like most VCs, by the way.
I bet on one
I'm
horse,
not even kidding.
But on one horse, I got $9,000 of my $30,000 back, and that was it. And the only investment since have been in my own businesses that
Amazing.
I've been running.
Well, you do have some sheep that you invested to.
I bet Carlos owns a sheep farm in Brazil, and I
won no way.
To bet Gertie. It's beautiful.
Now he owns like 4 or 5.
Beautiful ram plus 50% of all of its offspring. So I do have that investment, but besides that, I'm primarily focused on betting on myself. They all got to be hardworking, right? There's not a founder that can't put in 80 hours for a sustained period of time that's going to be successful in a tech startup VC.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
They have to be intuitively strategic. They have to be able to have their own pattern recognition, that they see what customers are saying, they get the feedback, and then they pivot quickly.
Which is so unique to each market, by the way.
Tell me about that.
Being able to read one market is very different than being able to read another market. You wouldn't believe how many bad takes I've had from founders trying to get their take on someone else's company. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They look at it through the lenses of their own company, and then it's like, oh, that's a bad take. And not that this is not me being critical of founders, it's because they have such a narrow lens into what they're doing. So to your point, they are highly strategic with their own business. That normally means they're not highly strategic in other things, even in other aspects of their lives. I can't tell you how many founders I know that are just completely disorganized with their own personal lives in many, many ways. And I look at that and I'm like, man, you live in total chaos. But this one piece of your life, which is the company you work with or on, is very well organized. Yeah, there's chemical imbalances in founders. But keep going. Yeah, that's a good point.
So what are some others that these are must-haves? And then on the flip side, The ones that lack integrity, that's not going to lead to long-term success.
Doesn't work.
The ones that, I'm curious on this one, the book Radical Candor has gained a lot of popularity over the last few years of caring deeply and challenging directly. I'm curious your take on that, if they actually need to care about their people or that's not as important as just being able to get results.
That's a great question. We have great founders we've worked with who care deeply, deeply, deeply about people, right? They go above and beyond. Their companies offer great benefits. They give raises often. They're generous with equity. Sitting here, I'm like, that's what a good person would do, right? That's what we should root for everyone to do. The reality is, some of the best founders we work with are actually extremely stingy. They don't share. There was one that once told me that his company was a machine. My company is a machine, and if a gear breaks, I need to go to the store, get a new gear, put it in place, and it has to keep running. And I don't really care who the gear is. It's essentially, there's a job to be done, and I don't care about emotions. There are companies that run fully remote where, they get together and do an yearly event and a yearly trip, and it's so important for that company's culture. There are companies where they run fully remote and they don't know who the other person is. And, I would say that latter style is a lot different than what you would expect to be a successful company, but that is a remarkably successful company that, is worth, $1 billion+ and it runs in a very fascinating way where people are literally blind to what other people are doing. They have tasks to perform. Think of it as the nowadays factory work, where you're not expected to hang out with the person turning the steel over there. If your job is rivets, you do rivets. Just a fascinating. It's fascinating how there is no right or wrong in building a company. There is working with your style and doubling down on it.
Would you say that's applicable only to early stage, or that continues to be true for scaling up and large companies?
As you scale, you will see that you'll find blind spots that you need to guard yourself against, right? If you're a founder that is, that example of a disorganized founder, I'm thinking one specifically, that founder hired incredibly organized people around them and surrounded himself with just remarkable people that could keep the operations of the company running. He was still the big vision, big thinker that he always was, but as the company scaled, he needed to get out of the more menial things in the business.
Is visionary one of those things that, this is a prerequisite to be a tech founder? You have to be visionary.
Do you?
That's what I'm asking.
I would even question that. Just as a very modest example, when you look at TaxBit started doing consumer tax work for crypto people.
Manual labor,
traders.
Manual labor as a service?
It wasn't manual labor because they did have some software, but it included a lot of manual labor, yes. And eventually they got pulled. I wouldn't say they forced the issue into being the premier destination for brokers to get their own forms that they need to issue to customers. Now that took years for the government to issue the regulation around that. What that has done is the vision of the vision of the founder originally, which was, we're going to enable taxes for crypto traders. It's like, well, that's very small compared to what they do now. It was more of a market pull than a founder push. So I would say in some cases, and Austin's an amazing visionary, by the way, the founder of TaxBit, with his brother Justin, but in some senses there is a stronger force than anything a founder can exert, which is a market force. If a market force forces you a certain way, a visionary could be dumb enough to resist that. A founder that is, uniquely positioned might just react to that and adjust the business accordingly.
Interesting. Okay, so by the end of this conversation, I want to know how you guys choose the horses that you're going to back. And you might just have a simple answer for that, but I want
That's hard.
Okay.
we debate that internally all the time.
We're going to crack that nut in the next few minutes. So tell me about founder problem fit. We talk a ton about product market fit.
Yeah.
But what's the connection that a founder needs to have to the problem that their business is solving?
So internally, we talk about mercenaries versus missionaries.
Tell us about that.
Our vision is, why are you doing this? And if it's the money, you're a mercenary. You're in the market because you want to, you see an inefficiency, and you want to address that inefficiency.
You see somebody that's going to buy a PlayStation 2, and you
exactly
want the delta between.
And I am the utmost mercenary, right? I sold Bluetooth speakers for the 2 years that Bluetooth speakers were cool, and then we went into a market that I abhor in the essential oil space.
Do you use essential oils?
Oh, heck no. Not once did I use essential oils. In fact, our office stunk of those things, and I was like, this place is hell. Get me out of here. But it's pretty fascinating, because I was the ultimate mercenary, not just in those businesses, but pretty much in every business I did, up until venture investing. If you don't start with the correct why, it's really hard to gain scale. So if you back a mercenary, you can expect that person will respond very quickly to incentives. So if there's an acquisition offer for $100 million, most founders that are, all founders that are mercenary driven, they will look at a $100 million acquisition offer in the early stage. So let's say they're doing sub 10 million revenue, and they'll say, that's my stop to get out. I'm going to get out of here, and someone else is going to take the upside, and that's totally fine. And if you look, that's what happened with Braven when we were acquired by Incipio. That's what happened with Lever when we were acquired by Sensi. And the reason was there was no real love for the work we were doing. We were literally doing something because there was nothing better to do, to a certain extent. You compare that to a missionary founder, and we have plenty of those, and that's what we look for. That's one of the main things we look for. And they get this $100 million acquisition offer, and they tell the offer party to go pound some sand. and I've actually had a founder look another founder of the business that was trying to acquire them in the eyes and say, if anyone's going to buy anyone in this market, I'm going to be the one buying you, and walks out the door. And it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? It was a great offer, by the way. I think it was like a 15x revenue.
What was can you tell us the product?
No, because that never happened, and we might buy them one day. I sincerely think that might be the case one day, but that guy's a missionary. He will not stop until he has 100% market share. And it is a beautiful thing to watch. Everything he does is based on, these customers deserve to be treated better than my competitor treats them, and I can help with that. So everything revolves around the customer. It's this customer obsession that leads someone to be a missionary. They leave the comfort of their homes, or however you want to put it, and they go do something really hard because they believe that it can be done better. They can do a better job at that than anyone can. And that's the type of founder we look for the most part. Now, there are some mercenary founders that were like, that person can care enough about the market. It's just very different, those two properties of a founder.
Does Album exist to make a return, or does it exist to move its mission forward? That's
a fantastic question. You're asking, are we mercenaries or missionaries? I would say we exist squarely focused on making a return. but there are principles we would never compromise on. So it's really common, unfortunately, being in a small market such as Utah, to have some, bad behavior by investors. We see it all the time. And if you want to know who those are, just ask a friend. Like, everyone knows
You're not going to share.
Everyone knows of a terrible story with investors. And the funny thing about terrible experiences with investors is they spread. So you can only have bad behavior for so long before you're cut off of the market. But in Utah, being a small market, you can actually sustain it for a little longer. And
decades?
Back in the day, you could. I think that's no longer the case. I think bad behavior is getting punished quicker now. So even though for us, we are all about making a great return for our investors, which we have, our roster of investors is second to none, especially not just when you look at Utah, but when you look at nationwide. We have had the chance, the privilege, the luck to have some really good returns early on, which allowed us to have to just assemble this dream team of LPs, limited partners, the people that invest in us. But what that does when you think of this, mercenary behavior that would be incentivized, this short-term thinking, is the long-term incentives keep us away from doing that. And so we don't. We side with the founders for the absolute most part of the time. We've never once had anything to do with the firing of a founder.
You guys have never fired a founder?
Not once.
Wow.
And we don't intend to. I mean, short of fraud, which again, if you vet character correctly, you can avoid most fraud. No, and there are some firms that they make it their practice to a certain extent. It's like, no, the founders get replaced, and we're like, no. If in fact, a founder got fired in one of the investments we had, and we sold the stock immediately, and funny enough, we got the highest price for that stock that's ever traded. It went public after this. We still had the highest price ever in that stock. So, and now we're sitting 4 years later, and it's like, well, it's not going to be that high again ever, probably. But it's we are very bent in doing the right thing in the long run, which is siding with founders. So we exist for the purpose of making a return, but we do this because we love it. So there is a mercenary cross here that is actually really useful. And that's what we look in founders, right? A full-on missionary will give product away. They will overspend. They will have bad gross margins. They will price wrong. They will have customer service, way over the top and probably not make any money. So you need kind of a balance between these two characters. And that's the balance that I'm talking about on our own vision of missionaries and mercenaries. I think there's a mercenary side, an album that desires to make a killer return, which we have thus far to investors. And there's a side that is very preoccupied with, are we doing right by our founders?
I've asked a lot of questions. Do you have any? I have another one.
I have another one. It's a follow-up on what he was talking about.
Ahead,
so I'm kind of blown away by the fact that you guys have never fired a founder. And because I actually, because it's such a common thing to hear with PEs and VCs. So I actually, before even you shared that, I had a question. I was in my Uber here, and I wrote it down. Can a founder scale up a company? And I mean, you don't even need to answer that, but I am curious to know, something needs to happen within the founder's mentality to allow him to take that from a startup to an IPO or a growing company. Is that a true statement? Does some development need to happen?
Yes.
What are those things that they need to develop?
I wouldn't know. We are early stage investors, and we kind of hope for the best once the company is big. Joking aside, we do have some recipes, but I wouldn't say we know how it should go. what I do know is when a founder's gone, the company loses its spirit. It's almost like the missionary side of the company is gone at that time. And the company, starts living in a different way than it has historically. And you start having this change in DNA that starts to happen. And as humans, we've called that cancer. When you have undesirable mutations.
Or evolution.
Sure. The problem with evolution is you evolve, and you evolve either to die or to survive. You never evolve to just maintain, right? Yeah. So we've seen that evolution be more deathly than thrive-worthy.
Can you tell me how that plays its part in that a machine type company, right? Where everyone's a cog. If it's lost its spirit, but they're all cogs,
it doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter. And that's where the biggest risk to that company is that founder being gone, because that is the only engineer in the machine. He is the engineer of those cogs. When you take other companies that have scale that we've seen founders transition. It's not that we've never seen founders replace themselves, but the difference is they drive that process. They're the ones selecting that new CEO. They're the ones normally raising their hands and say, I would not like to be CEO anymore. And we've seen that, and we're really supportive of that. And we stay close to those founders even after they're gone. Because to your point, some people can take a company from 0 to 200 million of ARR or 500 million of ARR. Some people can't, and that's totally fine. Some people are built for the 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 or 0 to 50. Having that self-awareness to know when to step up versus having self-doubt is a very delicate line. So we don't play with that line. We never instill self-doubt. When in question, we are supportive of the founder. You got this, you're going to grow through this. And yes, it's a total different skill set for them. They're learning new things. They're feeling pain because they're growing those new muscles that they've never used. They're managing, a ton of people. Too many direct reports, most of the time. And that's something that's new for them. But if we as investors start incepting those self-doubt thoughts, who can they look to for support? So we're very careful as to never instill self-doubt. And if anything, we're going to lean towards replacing the founder later than earlier. So if the founder wants to replace himself, we give him room to realize that on their own, and we discourage it, at first, and then if they're really bent on that, it's like, okay, let's plan for an orderly thing. Because the worst that can happen is the company reaches a kind of an asymptote. It's growth stalls and other things that are signs of a founder getting to the top of their limit. The other thing is most people underestimate market forces. Stalled growth is often not due to the internal things of the company. It can be just a market that's tough for them to navigate, or they've reached the limit on their ideal customer profiles. There's so many things that can cause stalling, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of people jump to conclusions. Oh, the founder reached their limit. And it's like, well, really? Is that the only lever that exists in this environment? It's probably not the only lever.
I'm obsessed with this conversation.
Great.
I thank you so much for sharing the afternoon with us. I have a buddy who, it was around the time that they were going to do another raise. They're still in pre-Series A, so it's like still seed fund. But he had a few employees, and I said, dude, and he was complaining about how much it costs for these employees. So why don't you just fire them? So we're about to go raise, and how bad does it look like if we fire these two people? And I just thought, and I bootstrapped Aspen, and I thought, it is unbelievably difficult, so hard to get a company from 0 to 1.
Yep.
Like, that's so difficult.
It's so hard.
And now, not only do you have to sell your customers on building it, sell your employees on building it, but now you have to sell your investors to put money in, and those activities that would sell your customers and be profitable are contrary to what you need to do to sell your investors. Can you touch on that for a little
Absolutely. We never see headline shrinkage as a negative thing. In fact, which is a very, very different take, by the way, from a lot of investors. A lot of investors track headcount number and they take that as proxy for growth numbers.
It's such a vanity metric.
It's such a vanity metric. We actually call that talent density. We want crazy talent density. The higher, the better. Now, is there a point where it starts breaking? Absolutely there is. But you won't know that it is breaking until it starts breaking. So in my experience, running things with a degree of stress is a very good thing, is a very positive thing. If there are no fractures in the organization, it means that there is not enough stress in the organization. If no one's complaining that they're working too hard, that means they're not working hard enough. And this goes with my kind of personal employee philosophy that is, it might be the reason why we're an office of 5 people, literally 3 partners, head of finance, and a wonderful office manager. That's it for us. The reason is I don't like managing people because I expect the world from them. And if they think that they can do something carelessly and I'm not going to notice, I will notice. And I will notice every comma, and I will notice every font, and I will notice every little thing. And the reason is I care deeply. So aligning yourself with people that care deeply can only be done in small environments. It's really, really hard to do it in big environments. So I applaud, and I think it's amazing that some people build big companies. I could never do it. I could never do it because I care so much about that talent density. So to your friend, I would say absolutely go ahead and let go of those 2 people, reduce your cost structure, and you look better. And it's like, no, we're bursting at the seams here. Things are hurting. We need to hire a head or 2. That seems, as an investor, a lot better than, hey, we have capacity to grow. We just want someone to come here and pay these people salaries. Yeah.
Carlos wrote down a question before this meeting, and hopefully you're okay with me plagiarizing your question or stealing it from you. The question, when we talked to you about the podcast, we said, hey, we'd love for you to be on this. And you said, we're not the type of VC firm that loves to hear our voice yelling into the wind.
Oh, we hate it.
And so Carlos wrote down the question and said, do founders of tech companies need to be yelling into the wind to go be successful? Not as a blanket statement, but as a general practice.
Look, I think people should do whatever suits them best. Some founders derive enormous value from, whether it's podcasting or feeling heard or actually being heard. For most of humanity, it's a vanity metric. Even the thought of participating in a podcast, to me, I was talking to my dad on the way here. We had a wonderful soccer game last night that my team just completely obliterated the other team in Libertadores. It's a big deal. You can look it up later.
Are you a Botafogo fan?
Atlético.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm a São Paulo fan. We lost to Botafogo.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That was sad.
We're good. We can still have.
Yeah. Well, we beat you guys 2 weeks ago on another one, right? But I was talking to my dad, and I mentioned, I'm gonna go participate in this podcast. And oh, that's so cool. I want to listen. I'm like, no, you don't. You kind of don't, right? Like, my dad's gonna derive zero value from podcasts, in my opinion. Now, he thinks it's really cool. And that's part of the problem of what's wrong with the world today, is people do things because they think they're cool, not because they actually enjoy the experience of being there. It's like going to it's like going to the Louvre and seeing the Mona Lisa. It's a small painting.
It's the most underwhelming thing.
But the room is like filled with humans and these guards that are like ushering people along, and there's like a very specific way the line moves. But then you have all these people crowding right in front of it, and it is a disaster. It is actually not a good experience. I would much rather spend time in 5, 6, 7, 10 other paintings in the Louvre, or pieces actually that are absolutely amazing, that are part of history, than to spend, time being shepherded around the Mona Lisa. And I think we do that with, our own voices a little bit. People want to hear themselves talk, so they record things. They come out with, they do writing, and some people have fantastic material. And those that do that, please keep doing it. It's awesome. I'm a fairly decent consumer of some of those, but I don't feel the need to crowd the room of the Mona Lisas. I would much rather spend time with the pieces that are, maybe slightly overlooked. So we do spend one-on-one time with the founders we work with, significant one-on-one time. We'll go out to dinners. Just last night, I was at a dinner with a founder, and we had, an hour and a half conversation over some delicious food, and very candid conversation that you don't get if you're meeting in an office. There's nothing saying you can't do both, but the reality is things compete for our time. So if you're shouting into the wind often, you don't have time to listen to the wind, if you will.
What keeps people from putting that on the back burner, all those other competing voices, and living in alignment with what actually provides value in their life?
I would say self-image is a big one. They think they need the picture. My wife's a photographer, so I'm married to a great artist in photography, and I am so grateful she actually collected all the memories that she did of our kids, and will sometimes sit and just see pictures of our young kids and little videos and things, and we did that just a couple of days ago. And I'm grateful she did that. But at the moment that she was doing that, I'm like, just be in the moment. Like, stop taking pictures, right? She has the strong sense to ignore that, my complaints, which is I'm really grateful for that. At the same time, there's a self-image that people have that they want to please, or they want to, get a memory of this. It is, back to the museum example, it is people taking pictures of works of art at museums. It doesn't make sense. You want a picture of that picture? Go to Google, and you'll get a much higher quality picture than you can take yourself.
We were at the Louvre no less than a month ago, and there was a lady walking around. I was looking at a picture, and she comes into the room. Picture.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, but you didn't look at it. Like, you just took a picture of this picture, but you never actually enjoyed it in person.
That's
what is
exactly
happening?
the problem. And I think a lot of material that gets put in the world is digital trash. I think there's an incentive nowadays to just document, quote unquote, document as much as possible, because storage is basically free. So are we enslaving ourselves to the gods of documentation, rather than, allowing ourselves for room to actually enjoy that moment in the museum? It's just an interesting paradigm. And I think that self-image is a big one. They think of themselves as a steward of documentation. They also want an external image. And that's my biggest concern, actually, is, when you see pictures of people in Greece, and you see all the little, white and blue, and they're wearing white shirts and perfectly matching with whatever, you're like, what kind of life are you living? And are you actually enjoying that? Right? It's like uncomfortable clothing. You can't be enjoying that. You just can't. It might look good, but there's no way you're enjoying that. So I'm a big fan of extremely comfortable clothing.
Can I just give you a quick shout out? These socks for album are next level. These are unbelievable. So
Album sucks.
look at that.
They're great socks.
Thank you.
But even our swag is very pragmatic, right? It's just comfortable. But when you go back to what do people actually want, I think most people don't know what they want. And that's what I think becomes a problem is they are living for pressures that they got from others. It is the time in Paris. We were there for the Olympics, and there were all these influencers. Who what's an influencer anyways? It's like famous for being famous or whatever. They're good at Instagram something. I'm not an Instagram. Like I'm a hater of social networks. I think they are net negative.
You didn't have to say that.
I think they're net negative to society. I really do. But we have these people like taking these fabricated pictures at these venues, and you can totally tell that it's a poor husband, boyfriend, or whatever, and they're doing this like these funky poses, and I'm like, gosh, like there's a game going on. Can you enjoy the game? In fact, your lack of enjoyment of the game is like rubbing on me. And I think people go through life with that attitude, even about startups. It's like, I need to be doing the right moves. Am I posting enough on LinkedIn? Am I saying what I do enough? How's my elevator pitch? And it's like, guys, chill. Are you building a great business? That's ultimately what it is about. And I've done a lot of self-discovery recently to think, am I building a great life? Is this the life I actually want to live? Is this how I want to live?
Gosh,
in my case, absolutely.
What conclusion you came to? It is?
Yeah. There's nothing I'd rather be doing, which is fascinating. It's a very comforting feeling.
How empowering is knowing that what you're doing every day, of all the things you could choose in the world, is exactly what you'd like to be doing?
It's terrifying because you stop looking around for opportunities. Camilla, my wife, has a very funny phrase. She is absolutely right. She's like, whenever you go too long without a new investment, you're kind of bored, getting anxious, because I live for this, and we only do 1 to 3 investments a year. And I went 18 months without a new investment, about 6 months ago. That's when it ended. And she said, whenever you're bored, you always come to me and you're like, should I go back to school and do a master's in anthropology? Because that's literally what I've told her before. And she was like, no, just no. Just no. It's empowering to know that I don't need to look externally for validation or for joy. That joy is actually found internally. That was a big lesson I learned when I was 14 and came to Idaho. That was my first foray into the U.S. That's when I learned English. This wonderful family in Sugar City, Idaho, took me in, and I was as an outsider can be. I'm this weird Brazilian kid from a big city in Sugar City, Utah, Sugar Salem High School, Sugar, Utah, Idaho. Like that's the outskirts of Rexburg. That's like I don't know, maybe 1,000 people city too. I don't even know. Maybe you guys look it up later.
Rexburg only has 15,000 people.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Outskirts of Rexburg.
It is the middle of nowhere. And going to high school as a 14-year-old in the U.S. without speaking any English during my summer vacations, mind you. Which, by the way, I arrived in November and I left in February. It was torture.
That's really like you breathe and you feel the air freezing inside.
Oh my
your lungs.
gosh! And those corners of the world are like dreadful. It is. We've driven past there, going to Yellowstone with the family. My wife's always like, "Let's stop, in Sugar and check out." And I'm like, "Nope, we're driving right past it." Oh, gone. Oh look, gone. We missed it. And But it was there that I learned that internal motivation matters a lot more than external motivations. And if I didn't come to peace with myself while there, that would have been a disaster, because you're in such a, you're by yourself. You're in the middle of nowhere. No one cares about you, really. And you're fully alone. And then you need to pull together your own thoughts about who you are. And that was an experience that taught me how to, be intrinsically motivated, not, depending on anyone's validation. Because the reality is there is no validation. You're a 14-year-old going to high school without speaking the language. There's zero validation, as loving as these people are.
Just for people here listening to that, I feel like that's like being from New York and going to the outskirts of Lima, Peru, and saying, hey, go enjoy a winter away from home where you know absolutely no one and you don't speak the language.
It was fascinating.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Should we fix this and then I have one more question?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
We're back.
We're back. So editor will thank you, editor. Okay, so we have 2 more questions for you. I'm so curious about this question. I'm really excited for your answer. And the question is, when you have a founder, is the success of the company more dependent on having a founder that's incredible at building this team of high performers and aligning them? Or is it much more important to focus on a founder who is the rainmaker themselves?
That is such a great question. I'll have to think about it for a second. I don't know that there is a right answer to that question. I think in different phases or stages of the business, you need different people. In the earliest stages, the founder that can move and shake the most is more successful. If that founder doesn't get out of the way later, they become a problem and potentially a liability for the company. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, but there is a point in which the founder's touch becomes a touch rather than a, lifting and a doing of everything. Mm-hmm. The absolute best strategy I've seen is people that hire folks that are better than they are at everything in the business. Well, at every individual aspect of the business. Mm-hmm. Restating it, the number one trait I've seen for founders that are successful in building a great team is finding specialists that are individually better at their specific discipline than the founder could ever be.
At what revenue stage is it great to go from generalist to specialist?
It depends on the company. I would say in SaaS startups, probably around $10 million in ARR. At that point, you really need a solid head of finance. You really need a solid, head of sales that knows processes rather than, more of a coach. You go to a coach of coaches. At that point, your customer success has to be scaling in a profitable way. It can't just be, more heads, more humans, more support. And all those things are done by specialists. It's really hard to hire a generalist for a head of finance. They need to really know their discipline. They need to know their metrics, and that, as a founder, that can handicap you if you don't have that.
What if you try and hire a specialist pre-$1 million ARR?
Pre-$10 million of ARR?
Pre-$1 million.
Oh, pre-$1 million. The specialists will be frustrated because there's not enough for them to do. Specialists see the world in very narrow lenses, and they look and they're like, well, why am I here? And it creates a disconnect between the value they're taking versus the value they're giving. And that's a major disconnect for specialists. They recognize and they leave. So you can try to hire them. It's just probably not going to work.
Diogo, just to wrap up this amazing interview, what is the greatest piece of advice that you have ever received? And what would you tell your 22-year-old Diogo?
Oh, man. That's a really hard question when you put it in absolute terms. Greatest piece of advice. One great piece of advice that I've taken throughout my career is to do your best in whatever you're doing. Warren Osborne, who was the guy that I worked for first in my career, used to say, say what you mean what you say, constantly. And it was like to the point of annoyance. But it was such a good lesson on just quality. It doesn't take a whole lot more to put high quality into whatever it is that you're building or doing. But it takes that extra 5 to 10% effort. And most people are not willing to do that. If you are, that's a massive differentiator. So that would probably be my number one piece of advice that I've, benefited the most from. If it's not worth doing right, it's probably not worth doing it, period. Being ruthless with what you choose to do so you can do it with full intent is probably, what I would do. And then for my 22-year-old self, I'd probably say that I've been an overstressor. I think the universe, God, whatever you want to attribute it to, has a way of rewarding folks that put in the work, and that are givers, people that really care about what they're doing to a deeper level than what they're getting from what they're doing. So my advice, looking back, is probably worry less and still put in the work. If you can dissociate the two things, your worry versus the amount you work, that's probably a healthy thing to do. But working with worries is just more stressful, harder, etc. And you can do the same quality of work without all of the stress. That's a recipe for a great life.
Can I repeat that back to you to make sure I'm understanding it correctly? There's this formula of hard work plus giving back equals success. And you hadn't experienced that until you did, but all the way up until you did, you were really worried, is this formula going to work? And what you've learned is that formula is an eternal truth, universal, or God, or whatever, that is set up that people can have faith in. If they work hard, they're consistent, and they have this give back mentality, it'll work out.
I think so. Yeah. I have yet to meet someone out. Luck plays a big part. So, but I think luck conspires for those that put in the work. So just showing up.
This has been amazing, Diogo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Amazing advice. Thanks, Diogo.
Thank you. Good.
It's a wrap.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.